Hello, my name is Maria Cornejo. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about this research, an evolutionary and acquisitional study on the acquisition of postverbal subjects in Spanish regarding information-focused structures. I will introduce the topic and talk about the hypothesis. I will describe the methodology and explain the structure of the experimental study. And finally, I will show the results and outline the conclusions. So the aim of this study is to research the interaction between word order and information structure in Spanish. This study concerns the acquisition of postverbal subjects by L1 and L2 English speakers of Spanish from an experimental and descriptive perspective. This project stands on the statistical and descriptive analysis of two linguistic experimental tests, the SMART test and the online test. As is known, the unmarked order in English, Italian, and Spanish is SVO. However, in Spanish and also in Italian, for example, the subject can be realized in postverbal position, and that's why we do this research. The general hypothesis is that the realization of postverbal subjects might be sensitive to specific focus types. So the research focused on studying the realization of subjects, specifically in postverbal position, in broad and narrow construction from an acquisitional and experimental perspective. For this reason, experimental tests have been carried out by children and adults. Analyzing the results obtained following the appropriate statistical methods according to the design of each test and thus according to the type of answer required. And conducting a comparative analysis on the accessibility of postverbal subjects by making use of the results obtained from the L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish, the adults, and determine where the differences found are significant. In any case, the comparative analysis of the results obtained by from the L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish is not explained in this presentation, okay? It is a descriptive analysis of results, though, in this case. Regarding methodology, as I said before, we have two experimental tests. The SMART test, intended to children, Spanish native children, to check and evaluate the evolution of the responses to the same stimulus. And also we use the control group of adults as a reference. The analysis and description of data was carried out by the Chi-square test and the online test intended to adults. We have a control group, Spanish native speakers, and a target group, English-speaking students of Spanish as a second language, to check whether the association between context and word order variation is part of the competence of an English learner of Spanish, and whether the differences found between L1 and L2 adults are statistically significant. And the analysis and description of data was carried out with the ANOVA test. So the SMART test was completed by 93 participants. We divided children in two groups, a group from 4 to 6 years old and a group from 7 to 9 years old, in order to do the analysis of data. So the test was a one-to-one question free answer test with the SMART characters intended to examine the syntax, discourse, properties of postverbal subjects in L1 children. Informants were students of a school in Seville, and as for the methodology, while children were presented a PowerPoint presentation, like a movie, and they were asked to answer one question concerning either the subject or action at issue. The test was distributed in two different sessions with 2 weeks distance, okay, because otherwise it was too long for children. Well, children were shown different scenes, and here we have an example, okay, of different scenes, different images, okay, that they were shown, and the one that we are interested in this case is information focus, okay, even though we have different examples, one for each type of focus, okay. In this presentation we're going to discuss the results on information focus, okay. So antes Pitufo enamorado ha cogido una flor y ahora ¿quién la ha cogido? So children had to answer, okay, a free answer to this question. For example, here you can see an example of the real PowerPoint presentation shown to children.
Antes, Pitufo enamorado ha cogido una flor. ¿Y ahora quién la ha cogido?
Okay, this is what they saw, okay, when they were watching the presentation, the movie.
Antes.
Oops, sorry. So the example that we have in here is the different options that children could say, you know, could respond, could answer. And well, in the class, because we were at a school, children were assisted by two people, and we had an answer sheet with the 4 possible options and could select the one provided by the child or take note of different answers as well. These are our options, okay. They were spontaneous and free answer responses, but we expected that they could answer something like this, okay. La ha cogido Pitufina la flor, o Pitufina ha cogido la flor, ha cogido la flor Pitufina, o la flor la ha cogido Pitufina, okay. Sometimes it's not an object, okay, what it's included in the sentence, but a different complement, okay. So, as I was saying, children do not provide standard answers, so we need to take into account some assumptions for the analysis. For example, the SVO category has been divided in null and over subjects. The variation in the selection of synonym verbs has not been considered. Cleft sentences have been included in a specific category, and only focus answers have been included in a separate category as well. So the online test was completed by the control group and the target group. The test, in this case, consists of a series of sentences set in different contexts and a final part, generally a question, with 4 options proposed in different word orders to complete the relevant micro test, okay? It was an online test, so a written test. The informants were the L1 speakers of Spanish, so native adults with similar features and ages from 18 to 60 years old, and the L2 English speaking of Spanish were university students between 18 and 25 years old with advanced level of Spanish. And in this case, the methodology was different, okay, as I was saying. The test was distributed online, so the informants had access to a survey by clicking the link previously received. So for each option, the students should provide judgment on its acceptability along a Likert scale running from 0 to 4. All options are grammatical, and the test is anonymous and takes about 20 minutes. This was the test taken as the model for the SMART test used for children, okay? So first we created the written test, the online survey, and then we adapted it and do the movie for children. And it was a different kind of test because the answers given by children were different, okay, were spontaneous. So as for the structure of the tests, well, we took into consideration the influence of 2 factors, the focus type, as I said before, and also the verb type. So transitive and accusative and ergative verbs, okay, and within them 2 different transitive verbs, 2 types, 3 and accusatives, and 2 interrogatives, one of each type along the test. And we concentrated on the 3 different types of FOSI, as I said before. This is an example of each type, as we've seen with children, although, again, in this presentation, only information-focused results are shown, okay? So one of the sentences and questions in the online test regarding information focus was: esta mañana había un gato en el jardín, pero ya no está. ¿Quién lo ha cogido? And they had the 4 options to answer the question on a Likert scale. And in this case, here we can see, a real example from the survey, from the online survey. They had the 4 options written. They could read it and choose a judgment, from 0 to 4, an option on the acceptability to answer the question, okay? The analysis methods were the ANOVA test and the chi-square test, because we needed to carry out the analysis in a different way for each test, because the structure, the essence of the test was different. So the ANOVA test was used to analyze the data with the Likert scale, and the chi-square test to analyze the data provided by children, by the spontaneous answers given by children. So, regarding discussions of results for children, the SMARTS test, we have the evolution of answering strategies by age, taking into account the 3 different types of FOSI, but we focus on the information-focused results, okay? And in this case, the preferred strategy for children from 4 to 7 is SVO. Children from 7 to 9 prefer this strategy as well, but the relevant percentage is considerably lower. So in general, VS strategies are considered as a late acquisition from narrow focus constructions according to these results. Regarding the results for adults, okay, the online test, we have the answering strategies by L1 speakers of Spanish on information focus. And in this case, SVO order is preferred for all verb types, and it's not influenced, this preference is not influenced by the verb. OVS and VOS orders are acceptable options when the postverbal subject is focus. After the SVO preference, and VSO shows very low values in general and different values for different verb types. Results on L2 on answering strategies by L2 speakers of Spanish are the following. SVO is the most acceptable order, and VOS is the second most acceptable option. In both cases, the level of acceptability not influenced by the verb. In relation to VSO, there is a high level of discrepancy regarding acceptability, influenced by the different types of verbs. And the OVS order is in general the least acceptable order and is not influenced by the verb type. So we can conclude that from an evolutionary perspective, postverbal subject strategies can be considered as a late acquisition from narrow focus constructions. And from a second language acquisition perspective, the existence of differences between L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish is relevant enough to carry out an experimental analysis that allow us to develop some didactic proposals for the classroom in the future. Okay, that's our goal for the future. So thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.